Revere TV, we are starting now.
Welcome, everyone. Okay. Today is Thursday, September 2nd. It is 5 o'clock Eastern Time. This is the monthly meeting of the Revere Human Rights Commission. We meet on the first Thursday of the month for our monthly meeting, and we'll begin by taking attendance. Lynn Alexis.
Present.
Lynn Alexis is present on Zoom. Chief Chris Bright.
Present.
Okay. Chief Bright is present in person. Chief David Callahan.
Present on Zoom.
Thank you. Present on Zoom. And I just realized I went out of order. I'm sorry. Reverend Tim Bogertman. Sorry about that.
Present.
Okay. Reverend Tim is present in person. Jalon Fowler is absent due to a conflict. Dr. Lorenzo Garcia.
Present.
Thank you. Dr. Garcia is present in person. Vice Chair Shema Mansour Hosseini.
Present.
Thank you, Vice Chair, present in person. Rashid Mukaber is not present. He is on vacation. Kuru Pish.
Present.
Thank you. Kuru is present in person. Kathy Reinstein.
Present.
Thank you. Kathy's present in person, and I am the Chair, Janine Grillo-Mara. Okay. And if you're not aware, we usually start our meetings with a few minutes of simply settling and arriving so we can be as fully present for our important work here in service. So just find a comfortable way to sit or even stand. And you can either close your eyes or keep them softly open in an unfocused way, whatever is best for you. And just simply feel the shape of your body and the way you're contacting the ground and the chair. Just letting the body settle in its own place, its own way. And just feel the breath flowing in and out. If it's helpful for you, you could take some slow, deep breaths. Maybe even releasing a sigh as a way of just letting go wherever you feel any stickiness. And just let yourself be, just as you are. Just whatever is unfolding moment to moment, give it space to be as it is. No need to control, get involved. Just for these moments. Let's take a few moments to bring to mind all those that are suffering. There's much suffering happening right now, particularly those that have been affected by flooding, the earth itself, around the world, the suffering that's happening, to be grateful for what we all have, that we're safe right now, and wishing well to those who are suffering. Mr. Cantor, could you put the mission statement up for people that could be watching? And when you're ready, Dr. Garcia, if you would state the mission statement for us.
Revere Human Rights Commission statement. The mission of the Revere Human Rights Commission is to promote human and civil rights and empower all people of Revere by ensuring that everyone, especially the most vulnerable and marginalized, have equitable opportunities, equal access, and are treated with dignity, respect, fairness, and justice.
Thank you, Dr. Garcia. The first agenda item that requires our attention is the approval of the minutes from the August 5th monthly meeting. So first, does anyone have any questions or proposed edits to those minutes, which were distributed to you earlier this week? None noted. I will entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Lynn Alexis makes the motion.
Second.
Karun pitch second. I'm going to go through and just call on you, and you can say that you are in favor. Kathy?
Yes.
Reverend Tim?
Yes.
Vice Chair Shea?
Yes.
Chief Bright?
Yes.
Dr. Garcia?
Yes.
Lynn Alexis?
Yes.
And Chief Callahan?
Yes.
Thank you, all in favor. And we have three topics. Oh, I didn't leave someone else, did I? No, okay. We have three topics for discussion this evening. The first is the RPD, the Revere Police Department, updated use of force policy presentation, which was given by Sergeant Joseph Turner at our August monthly meeting. It was an excellent presentation. And even though we were here for 2 hours, it still felt that maybe some questions and discussions were cut short. We are talking about some opportunities to continue these conversations that might happen outside this meeting through Revere TV. It's very, very preliminary discussions at this point. This could be a topic, or there might be other topics that involve the HRC. So as a way to follow up from last month's meeting and for us to get some ideas of if we were to continue, how this might go, I'll call on each of you, and I'm asking specifically if there were particular questions that you felt maybe were outstanding from last month as you've reflected on it, or that you don't feel were completely answered. Or maybe there were certain topics or threads within the presentation that really stood out for you that you'd like to see continued discussion. Okay, so Lynn Alexis, will you go first, please?
Sure. I think the questions that I answered were, the questions that I asked were answered. I do recall the officer stating that, you know, obviously some of the issues are something that they're still being mindful of. For an example, for the supervisors to know that there are certain calls to be dispatched to certain officers with certain skills and abilities. So he did note that that was something, just, human nature that the police force are cognizant of and try to handle each call accordingly. So I think the question was answered, but I am aware that there's obviously still work that needs to be done and just the mindfulness of it.
Thank you, Lynn. Actually, I'll wait on Chief Callahan since he's the chief of this department. Kathy Reinstein?
Thank you, Madam Chair. At this time, I don't have anything else I think I'd like to add. I just want to say that I thought it was a really thorough presentation. And if there's an opportunity to further the discussion, whether it's here or through cable in some way, I think that'd be beneficial to everyone. Thank you, and thank you to the Sergeant for being here.
Thank you, Kathy. Dr. Garcia?
I think the presentation was it was a very good presentation, especially because for the time that I have been here in Revere, I never saw a police department, at least from my experience, coming and talking about the structure of the program and being transparent about the practices that they have in the department. Obviously, that's in my view, at least, I think it's a right step in the right direction. That was great. The presenter was very enthusiastic, spoke about the institution. One remaining question that I have is the question about the diversification of teaching of the police staff. And obviously, those are the types of issues that we need to have at the forefront of our work, considering the diversity of our city, the students that we have in our schools, and the multitude of other issues that affect immigrant families and the community in general. I'd like to hear some of the strategies that either the institution or the mayor or we as members of the Human Rights Commission, probably we should be involved in this discussion, because the more discussion we have, the stronger the police institution will be, the stronger our institutions will be, and obviously we'll have more better prepared officers that are culturally and linguistically competent to deal with our immigrants in the city. So I think it's a win-win proposition. In the end, as a community, we're all going to win.
Thank you, Dr. Garcia. And I'm just, since that was a lengthier response, I want to just sort of reflect on that and make sure I have it correctly. You appreciated the transparency. Your main point that you've been considering since then is the diversification of staff and how that needs to be at the forefront and how that's important for the community. And you'd like to hear from maybe the department, the mayor, as well as maybe the HRC could also offer strategies for going forward with this.
Correct. Thank you.
Okay. Reverend Tim?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I was able to watch the presentation. It was very thorough. I echo what was said. I really appreciate Sergeant Turner's time with us and how he presented it so well. I also, it's funny, Dr. Garcia brought it up. I had circled what Carew had asked. Carew asked the question about diversification of the force and how that continues, and I think that is an important question we need to ask for our community as we reflect the diversity we have, that our staff, shows that in our police force. And, I said, I'm very thankful that they came. I appreciate the presentation, but it's an important question we need to ask, and how do we move forward to reflect our community and have that more within our force? And I welcome a conversation continuing, outside of these chambers, if we can find ways to pursue that together. So thanks so much.
Thank you. Chief Bright?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have any follow-up questions, but like my colleagues on the commission, Sergeant Turner gave a great presentation. worked with him over the years, and I know he does an outstanding job at the training at the police department and working with other agencies, which is very important. So I hope a lot of people in the community watch the meeting and listen. I mean, this is the new face of the police department, and I think they're really trying. You know, these are very difficult times, but they are trying to improve, like we all are. And I think it was a great meeting for the HRC, and I'd like to see more of these things going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Karu?
I already stated at the last meeting, and at the same time, I appreciate the conversation we had and the training that Sergeant Turner brought to the meeting. I heard Sergeant Turner said that the recruitment is not just affecting the city of Revere, but it's statewide. So I would love to see the changes throughout the state as well, because the recruitment is not just from Revere itself, from what I remember what he said.
Thank you, Karu. On that point, I think not only was it statewide, but it was also based on test scores. So that was, I believe that was another sort of concern of discussion. I see people nodding their heads, so, okay. What about background checks? Okay.
Sorry, I think that was another thing they talked about with recruitment is not only test scores, but background checks.
Vice Chair Shea?
I'm just gonna go and say, I agree with everyone, when they say that. I also appreciate the, presentation. It educated me on what I didn't know about the police force and how it works, and I appreciate the fact that they're finding more ways to more ways to not go towards the more physical route. Like, how can we dissolve the situation before it gets too physical? I guess like one thing that I forgot to ask him in the sergeant in the previous meeting is like one thing that stuck with me was how little I feel like they focus on implicit bias. I think he said, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think it's like 4 or 5 hours, maybe even 8 hours. I personally believe that kind of training should be extended to even days, because such implicit bias is like built upon over years and even decades, and I feel like eight hours or how many hours they focus on it isn't enough. And even like point out the explicit bias that typically happens within the police force, even if it's not seen within our current one, it's good to talk about it just to make it known. But other than that, I appreciate the sergeant for coming in and like answering all of our questions, because I know we kind of hit him with the hard questions, but those are questions that we should be asking our police force, because that's what's going on in our community. So, but overall, I really enjoyed it, and hopefully we could move and progress with whatever we're doing right now.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Chief Callahan?
Yes, I just want to thank everybody for their comments. And we're trying to do a better job, especially in these tumultuous times. We're trying to be more open and transparent and give people a more understanding or a better understanding what we do and why we do it. And I mean, I can answer some of the questions that some of the members had if you would like, Madam Chairperson, or we can do it at another time. If we have a few moments tonight, I could probably answer some of the questions.
Sure, that sounds great. Maybe I'll add my one comment that stuck with me, in addition to what's already been mentioned, was that only state police have to go through annual fitness evaluations and testing. That sort of is a concern to me, that if someone is not as fit, then they're more likely to use more force because they don't maybe have the skill set to be able to do some of the other strategies and maneuvers that Sergeant Turner had mentioned. So that was just a concern that had stood out for me.
Yes, it's definitely a concern, and it's something that probably should be addressed at the state level. It should be something that's like mandatory, even if it's every other year, every 2 years, there should be some type of physical fitness component for everybody, and it should be statewide, but it's not. And I'm sure that's something that's going to be revisited down the road, because I've heard it talked about in the past, and it seems like it just hasn't gained any traction. But it's definitely something that's very important, and it should be a mandatory thing for the police departments in the state.
So it sounds like that is something that's been discussed, and you agree that it needs more attention so that it can be statewide, not just at the state police level. Is that what I just heard you say?
Yeah, absolutely. It should be statewide, not just with the state police, and it's not. And that's something that probably can be addressed by the state legislator. And when they talk about like officer wellness, that should be something that's mandatory. And we'll see as time, hopefully that can be implemented. Like I know some departments added into the contract with a monetary value. They'll give officers like an incentive for physical fitness and stuff like that. So that's something also we can visit as a department. But there's a few different avenues we can go, and we can try them.
Thank you, Chief. Feel free if you wanted to make any comments about what the others had mentioned.
Yes, absolutely. The first question that I heard from a few different people was about the diversity or the makeup of the department. Currently, we're at about 25% between female and minority on the police department. That is people who speak foreign languages and from a diverse, go with the diverse community. So we're better than a lot of other departments, but as time goes on, every time we've been hiring lately, we've been hiring more and more people that speak Spanish or Latino culture, and it's been extremely helpful just with community interaction and how to deal with situations. And sometimes is that cultural barrier. And we have some great officers that are women and by chance Latino, and they're able to resolve these matters very easily with that language barrier, or just settle down the situation or de-escalate it, and then we move on. And that has been extremely helpful. So we're going to continue to work on that, and we're probably going to do some more hiring, and I can see we're going to add some more people to the department that are going to fit the makeup of the community.
Thank you.
Did that kind of answer that question? I know, Dr. Garcia, you mentioned that. We're going to try to work on it. And especially now, we seem to have a big turnover, or it's coming that way now.
Does anyone need to comment further before Chief Callahan answers anything else? I don't see anything, so continue, Chief.
Okay, I know there was a question about implicit bias training. And I know it's kind of minimal right now, but we're going to do some extra training as a department. We're going to have some different people come in, different instructors come in and give additional implicit bias training to the department. And like I think we've said in the past and with Officer Turner, we've been kind of ahead of the curve as a police department, and we're going to continue to go in that direction and try to do a better job.
Thank you.
Does that answer the question for the chair?
It looks like Karu would like to speak. Go ahead, Karu.
Chief Callahan, I appreciate the training. My question is, how do you measure after the training and the practices of implicit bias? How do you measure that?
Could you repeat your question, Karul? For some reason, I couldn't hear it that good.
After the training and practices, how do you measure the implicit bias with officers?
Crew, that's sometimes a difficult question to answer. I mean, you know, with the training, I'm sure there's some type of, you know, component where we'll have a discussion after it, and then we do some other follow-up, and we've changed some policies at the department. So it gives the officers a little more of a guidance and things that we're looking for. But it's something I think we can build upon, and I know we're kind of on a low level, but we can build upon that implicit bias training and do additional training and build up their knowledge. And from that, we'll probably do some advanced training on it.
Thank you, Chief.
Anyone else? Dr. Garcia.
Chief, just to help out a little bit, there are tests, scientific tests nowadays that allow to measure unconscious and implicit bias. I can send you a couple of links that you can check. They're very precise, actually, because they deal with a lot of psychological and other, you know, social aspects of the candidate. So I'll send you some links that you can take a look. Maybe we can engage some experts to come and do some training down the road.
Dr. Garcia, I would really like that. If you could send those links, I would really appreciate it.
Dr. Garcia, why don't you send them to me so I can send them to the full commission? I think everyone might appreciate that, or we could, you know, put them as part of our resources.
Will do.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you, Chief Callahan, and please again pass along to Sergeant Turner our appreciation, and I will follow up as we can explore how we can continue these conversations, not only with Sergeant Turner, but then maybe in other areas like healthcare and other areas that may involve the HRC.
Okay, and I will pass that along to Sergeant Turner because I really appreciate all the support and how you folks are all willing to listen to Sergeant Turner, and you hit him with some good questions. Some of them were a little difficult, and he answered them, and he did a good job. And I also heard a lot of positive response from the community. Different folks approached me and were very pleased at the presentation he did. And again, thank you very much. And we can have him back again. And if you have a specific topic or whatever you want to explore, I'll bring him in, and whatever we can do to make people understand a little better. And it's probably helpful for us as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. And I will keep the commission, as well as Chief Callahan and Sergeant Turner involved as we get further information of how we might be able to accommodate this, and maybe through Revere TV would be a better platform, so it's not, you know, at our monthly meetings when we have other business to discuss. So I will keep you all updated. The next topic is our Hrc Resources Web Page. And for this evening, although this is a somewhat of a bigger project and there's been more done, we're going to focus on one area, but we'll hear from Vice Chair Shema so she can give us a little bit of an update.
Hello, everyone. So as you guys have known for the past couple of months, me, Janine, fellow HRC member, Jalan Fowler, and of course, Dr. Garcia, and the rest of you. Essentially, you know, we've spent a couple of months, you know, just finding resources and then essentially just sending them off to Jalan. And all of us collectively have put it into a spreadsheet in which just categorizes each of the resources. But essentially what we decided to do from there is how we could add how people from the community along with us members to add on to that spreadsheet, and that's why we decided to do the Google form. And as you guys have seen in the past couple of weeks, Madam Chair did reach out to everyone to submit just like a resource to see how the Google form works. And essentially, I'm gonna just open it up to the Madam Chair is gonna open it up to the rest of the HRC to see, just get like some sort of feedback of how you felt about the Google form, what can be improved on, any suggestions on how it could be a lot more accessible to people in the community, and so on and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Shea. Ruben, can you have that form ready to screen share? This form integrates into the spreadsheet, but because it'll be a much bigger conversation to talk about what will get included, how it will be used, how it would be approved, tonight we wanted to just focus on step one. I think almost everyone here was able to either submit a resource or just submit a test through the form. So, Ruben, why don't you just pull it up in case we need to look at it, or we can, at least the public can see it. For now, it's not live to the public because we're still working out the kinks internally. So maybe, Ruben, can you put on your mic and read the questions? Is that okay? Oh, okay. Okay, go ahead. Yes, Shay, that would be excellent.
So first question is, what is the title of the resource? So it's just the title, the name, and just like any details just describing the resource itself. The next question is the type of resource category that this would fit into. So essentially, like, is it a book? Is it a movie? Organization, paper? And essentially, the next question is just add a brief description of what of the resource that you or the person is trying to add. So kind of like a brief summary of what, or a synopsis of what the resource is about. And then obviously the next question is to provide any links that allow other people to access the resource. And the following question is, please note any of the following additional category keywords that you'd like to tag your resource with. So these are like the hashtags. So does it talk about activism? You would do a hashtag activism. Is it about immigration? You would put hashtag immigration, stuff like that. And then under other, it's like if there isn't any categories that you don't find, you just add the hashtag. The following question is, provide us name and contact information just in case we have any additional questions to ask prior to the publication of the resource, or just in case it's just any questions before, in order for it to get approved. Like if we have any questions about the actual resource itself, we have a point of contact to answer any of those questions.
Thank you, Shay. Because I couldn't see it without my glasses, that's why I thought Mr. Cantor had to read it from his laptop. So, the last field, the person's name would not be publicized, published, it would just be for internal. So we'll go around and I'll see if you have input. Feel free to pass. If you're not ready to speak, we'll come back to you. And really what we want to know is, was the form easy to use? Did you see any fields missing, any hashtags missing, or any other information on the use of submitting the form? So we'll change the order so people don't know who's coming. Karu?
I appreciate the committee who's putting this together. I looked through it. Did we have disability on that form? Disability. Is it, because I did not see it.
So let's make a note that should, disability, ableism, whatever we want to call it,
Right.
but
Thank you.
thank you for noticing that. Was that all, Karu?
Yes,
Thank you.
you.
Okay. Chief Bright?
Yes, I'd also like to thank the subcommittee members for the work on that. It seems like I mean, there's a lot of stuff there, and, I mean, obviously it took a lot of time, thought, and effort to put in there. I'm not the most technologically challenged. I am kind of technologically challenged, I should say, but I did try to put an entry in there. I'm not sure if it was successful or not, but again, I think it's a great thing to have on our page, and I look forward to learning how to navigate it better. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief, and it did come through. Lynn Alexis?
Yes, thank you. I also just want to thank everyone. It seems really thorough and thoughtful, so I don't have anything to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Chief Callahan?
Yes, I'm similar to Chief Bright. I was having a little difficulty with the form, but I think it's an excellent idea. And it just gives a lot more things to look at. And I really appreciate all the work everyone else did on it as well on the committee. Thank you.
Could you be specific to what you had difficulty with so it could help us to, from a technical perspective, improve it?
I think it was just, it looks like it was an issue with my Google account.
Okay, so is that anything, Mr. Cantor, that we could do? Not really?
It should not require a Google account to access the form. So we should test that out, but I believe it's set up so that people who don't have Google accounts can still access it. I will do a little testing on that, though.
Thank you. Reverend Tim?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, thank you again for the subcommittee for their work on this. It was really well done. Loved seeing the website, and I found it easy to manage, easy to input information, and no offense to anyone who didn't. It just, but I was easy to input and to put it on there, so very helpful. And hashtag I thought could add is Christian. I saw Jewish and Muslim, but me add that hashtag because one of the books I added was a resource within that. So it was great. That's one small thing to add. But overall, very great to add those in. I also understood, like, you can give the book description or whatever it may be, flowed right with it. So I thought that was very helpful. So great job. Really appreciate the work that was done.
Thank you. I have a question for the group before we continue on. I'm wondering if we should have a hashtag religion or hashtag spiritual so that we're not overlooking any particular group.
It's a great suggestion. Okay.
Dr. Garcia?
Yeah, the form itself is very, user-friendly. It was work well done. I'm not sure I saw gender there and disability. So I think disability has already been mentioned by Karu, but I'm not sure I saw gender there. I might be, gender.
Gender, okay.
And there is one thing that I did not see there. I saw Latino Hispanic, but I'm not sure I saw Native Americans.
I think we put indigenous.
You put indigenous, okay, all right, so then that will solve that. I think it's well put together. I think, the committee did a fantastic job. It's very thorough, user-friendly. I enjoyed it so much that probably I submitted 5 or 6 entries.
Thank you, Dr. Garcia. And the beauty of this is that it's fluid. So it's not that this is a specific amount of time that you can only submit resources. We're doing it now, testing it out, but, is times change or resources come your way or the public's way, we can always be adding to it. So thank you. Kathy?
Thank you. I'm happy to be in the Technologically Challenged Club, and I'm in very good company. I want to thank everyone for their work, and I want to thank you, Madam Chair, for your patience with me because it was not anything the form didn't do. It was strictly operator error that you had to text me to see if it was me because I didn't put my name there. and it was very self-explanatory, so I just want to apologize for that. But I think it's great, and I look forward to spending a little more time and entering some things. So thank you all for your hard work on it.
Thank you, Kathy, and no need to apologize. Vice Chair Shea, I know you've been in the sort of working of this. Did you want to add anything?
Not really. Seeing that a lot of people have technical difficulties even within our own commission, I want to see if we can make it a lot more accessible. Maybe, actually, now that I think of it, maybe like have it in different languages. Knowing that, like, since our community is growing in terms of brown population, English is obviously not going to be the only language that we're going to be dealing with. So definitely having the form in different languages, and like, I don't know, I don't have a solution to this, but finding a way of how people who are disabled to access these resources, but also submit their own resources. I don't know how we're gonna do that, but I feel like that's something we should definitely take in consideration. Other than that, I don't have anything off the top of my head, but I'll definitely bring it up to the rest of the group when I do think of anything else.
Thank you, Vice Chair. And just to review, Vice Chair Shea and Jalon Fowler really sort of took the lead, and then Mr. Cantor helped out to really organize the spreadsheet and suggest the Google form, which feeds directly into the spreadsheet. So even though we'll talk about this at a future meeting, I just want to sort of give you a little brief overview. I'm going to share my screen. So this is the actual spreadsheet that has 3 pages. So once resource would be approved, and all of that needs to be discussed. If we chose to use this, they would come to this page 1, which has the resource name, the type of resource, if there is any link, the hashtags, and if there's any additional description. And then page 2 is, oh, no, that's actually supposed to be page 1. I thought this was page 2, Ruben. But anyway, these are all those hashtag definitions, just so we have them somewhere. And then the 3rd page, so this, when you submit the form, it actually feeds directly into this page 3. So we don't have to do some extra work there. And this is where we'd be able to look at them to see who submitted them, and if we have questions, and whatever is determined would be the approval process if we were to publicize these. So, and then what it would look like, this page 1 would then feed directly into a web page. Now, I know this isn't very pretty. I know it doesn't have a lot of videos and things. However, since we don't have a lot of staff, this, once anything makes it to the first page, it would automatically just get updated on this web page. So from an efficiency point of view and not requiring staff, this really works well. And we could, Mr. Cantor can speak further, but we do have room where we could put pictures or any other kind of information that, so it's not so text heavy. But I just wanted to mention how the Google form feeds into a page of the spreadsheet. Once we decide, if we decide we're going to use these and they go to the front page, that automatically gets published into a web page, which we would have the link on our HRC web page. So we'll discuss that more and see if people have other ideas or how everyone feels about sharing resources and approving them. But I just wanted you to have a sense of what's been happening behind the scenes. Do you want to add anything, Mr. Cantor?
But please call me Ruben.
Ruben. And you can call me Madam Chair. Just teasing, okay. Can I stop share? Because we're not going to get into a discussion about this, I just wanted to give you a little preview. I guess someone overrode me, okay. So, okay. The final topic for discussion is an update on re-precincting, and Ruben Cantor, who is here assisting us tonight, is the chair of that committee. So he is going to give us an update on the re-precincting that is happening as a result of the recent census changes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I have a presentation, but I have been told that I often go through my presentations too fast. And this presentation in particular is meant to be an hour, and I really want to just keep this to 5 or 10 minutes. So I'm going to do like sort of a very brief description of what re-precincting is, and it'll probably be easier for me to just open it up and find out what is on your mind, and I can answer those questions. So re-precincting happens every 10 years after the U.S. Census releases the data to the cities and towns. The cities and towns have the opportunity to account for where the population changes have happened since the previous precinct, and then redraw the precinct lines because those precinct lines, because of the changes in population, they may no longer be legal. And the reason why they may no longer be legal is that population changes require that every precinct be within a certain margin of one another. So every precinct has to be about the same size. Legally, it's within 5% of one another. I think ideally you're trying to get much less than 5% so all the precincts are the same and all the wards are the same. So that is the process that the city of Revere is going through. You probably saw some of the big headlines that came out. Revere is the fastest growing city and town in Massachusetts. And that growth is across all wards. It's not just, the development in certain locations, it's happening everywhere. And so that's going to require some pretty big changes in sort of where we draw the boundaries so that we can have those equal precincts. One of the things that is a little bit up in the air right now, the legislature has a bill in front of it trying to determine whether or not they are going to draw the district boundaries for the legislative districts and the congressional districts before or after the cities and towns draw the precinct boundaries. And they still have that decision before them. And that's really important because if they draw the boundaries first, then we would want to try to fit our precincts within their boundaries. But if we draw our boundaries first, then they would want to fit the districts, the congressional and the state representative districts, into the precincts that we've drawn. And I don't want to go into all of the wonky details of why this is really important, for advocates and for the legislature. There are some very specific reasons that they're having this conversation. They just haven't had that determination yet. So as a city, what we are going to do is we are going to start the process of having public forums to discuss the redrawn, the necessity to redraw boundaries. And so we are working on putting together some draft maps, a series of maps just for a topic of conversation, and try to have a public forum later in September as part of the re-precincting efforts for the city. And this is efforts being led by the election commissioner, by the director of outreach, and by parts of our mapping and legal teams and myself on the data and innovation side, putting all this information together so that we can have public conversations. And so the key piece, one of the key pieces that we're working on is ensuring that in the redrawing of the maps, there are two key things in terms of community of color and other community of interest votes and voters, is to ensure we're not packing and we're not fragmenting. And those are I think they're kind of legal census terms. Packing is putting all of certain communities of interest into a single district just to compress them all in one place and not let them have power in other locations. And fragmenting is dispersing those voters in so many locations that there's no ability for those certain communities to have those interests. And so the public process is really designed to allow those different communities. It can be race and demographic and ethnicity focused. It can also be different things like, income based, or the density of the properties, or any of a number of religions. I mean, there are a lot of different types of communities of interest. I think the one that we think of the most is certainly our communities of color. And the data that we have from the census for 2020 right now is mostly our race and ethnicity data. We're still waiting for the drop of the rest of that data, which we think we're going to get towards maybe October, but we're not sure. One of the key things I think is particularly relevant for the Human Rights Commission to know about is that the 2020 census data shows that Revere is now a majority BIPOC, a majority community of color city. It's about 55% BIPOC, Black, Indigenous people of color. And that's a pretty big change since 2010. And one of the things that I thought was interesting is I looked through that data, and if the Human Rights Commission wants a data presentation on some of the changes, certainly that can be something for the future. I don't think we have the time for that today. But we saw growth, especially in the Hispanic Latino communities, again, across every ward in the city. It was not, it was not consolidated to, single neighborhoods or specific areas. It was really everywhere. So this is going to drive a lot of our conversations and a lot of our decision-making. We did see substantial growth in the population in Ward 2 in particular. So that means that the boundaries for Ward 2 are probably going to have to be smaller, assuming we use the existing wards as sort of the basis of those future discussions. The ward with the slowest growth was Ward 6. And so those boundaries are probably going to have to grow a little bit to account for that. And then, everything sort of else in between. So that's kind of that's really broad strokes. But we are going to have a public forum to have a conversation, hear from members of the community on what their thoughts and priorities are. Currently, there is a page out there, and I will go to that page now. So if you go to revere.org, I think I know how to share my screen by now. If you go to revere.org, on the revere.org page, if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see it's time to draw the lines. And here's the opportunity to go on to our Redrawing Revere page. This is an engagement page. And you can see these green lines are actually people who came on and took the time to make some proposals around where they would like to see some boundaries drawn. And the pins have some information in them as well. And then, we ask a lot of questions, and people provide us their thoughts on the topics related to the city's redrawing. And then we ask a number of questions around the individuals. We do have a data and history area, and this has some slideshows that you can learn a little bit more. We're actually going to update these hopefully in the next week. There's going to be some new information on these slideshows as well. There's also an explanation of what is reprecincting for those who want a little bit more information in detail. So this is going to be one of the things that we are going to be bringing to the forum, these answers, the ones that are constructive anyway, and make sure that they're a part of our conversation going forward. And I think with that, I've probably spoken more than you want, Madam Chair, but I'm happy to answer questions or to have anyone who has thoughts on these topics.
That was great. We'll go around. I'll give everyone an opportunity. You can always pass, but this way we make sure that everyone has an opportunity. Kathy?
This is great. I am really looking forward to checking that out and maybe coming to some of or listening. Being a big nerd with this stuff, it's great to see it's so accessible to everyone. I guess my one question, which maybe, I don't know if it can be answered, is, there's been different things that have been done over the decades. I mean, traditionally, lines are drawn, where it makes sense, like on a corner, down the middle of a street. We know that there's some instances that that's not the case in Revere. Is the thing that, so all the lines that are currently drawn are obviously up for consideration, considering the population growth then, right?
Yeah, I mean, we would have to consider every line in some sense. But one of the things when I spoke with our mapping guru is I said, let's really try to focus on using the natural geographic, boundaries that exist now, or the major streets. You know, we always hear people say, well, why am I in Ward 1 and my neighbor who's right across the street is in Ward 2, right? Like, or whatever. The problem is that it is actually illegal to draw boundaries behind people's backyards.
Yeah.
So there's just no way around the likelihood that there are just going to be people in different precincts and even in different wards who are literally across the street from each other that just can't be avoided. However, we are going to do our very best to use as many natural boundaries as we can to minimize that kind of thing. And as we go through the drafting process, we definitely hope people will take a look at those and say, hey, here's an opportunity to sort of adjust a little bit here or there. And so that's, I think, part of what we're hoping people will tell us.
Well, I really appreciate your wonkiness, and I won't bore everyone totally, because I am too, and I think that this is so great. So I will stop being a nerd right now in public, so thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Garcia?
I just want to thank you for updating us on the presenting on the development, on the recent development about the city of Revere in terms of reorganization, also in terms of demographics. That's actually what you just said in terms of the majority being the majority in the city. That reinforces the work that the mayor has just started, and also the work that right now is in motion in our city in terms of making sure that policies, are examined, practices are re-examined, and to ensure that we have a culture that's very supportive of the population we serve. So I think that validates our work, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and certainly, I can see a bright future for this community as long as we stick together. We know the needs that exists, and the data is on our side. So that's the beauty of this.
Thank you. Lynn Alexis?
Yes, thank you. Just listening to some of these stats, I'm incredibly encouraged and proud of the work that the city has done and is doing. For Ruben, I'd love to, maybe if we can get a copy of your presentation. I think that there's just a lot to learn, I know, from my standpoint, and I'll be accessing the resources on the website as well. But I mean, if you do have something, I'd love if it could be accessible to us as well.
That's a great question. The presentation is currently available on the election department website. If somebody wants a copy of it, I can certainly send the PowerPoint or the PDF of it directly, but it is on the in the forms, and I think it's called the forms and links section of the election department site now.
Oh, okay, great. That's sufficient. Thank you, Ruben.
Thank you. Reverend Tim?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Cantor, thank you so much for your presentation today. Really appreciate all that you've done. It was very well done. Thank you for laying that all out. Very excited about it's time to draw the lines and having that online to discuss that. Curious too, how do we prevent from fragmenting? What are ways you go through to have that process? Because I understand packing makes sense to me. Just curious how you adjust for fragmenting, and some of the lines that we draw with that.
Well, I mean, I think that there are some people who draw boundaries with a specific intent of fragmenting. I don't think that's going to be a problem in Revere. I'm just laying it out as sort of the types of things that the census and the legal eyes are looking for. But I actually don't think that's going to be something. But what we are going to be in the draft maps that we're going to be putting together, we'll put some demographic percentages and data in there so people can see those, and that will be certainly part of the conversation. We know that that because of Revere's growth, and because Revere had the change, and because Revere also had a couple of well-watched state representative races, I think that there'll be a lot of the advocates who will be monitoring how we go through our process, and we want to make sure that we're doing it right, and that they're supporting supportive of the work we're doing.
Thanks so much, Ruben. Appreciate your presentation here.
Chief Bright?
Thank you. I have nothing further really to add. I concur with the comments of my fellow commissioners, and I'd like to thank Ruben for his work on this. It's very exciting to see Revere, the fastest growing community in the state, and all the positive things that are happening, and to be involved in the commission during this time period. So we look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Karu?
Thank you so much, Ruben, for the presentation. I greatly appreciate that. I'm also curious about how the housing and economic impact the growing
Karu, excuse me,
population.
could you, because of the mask, could you just speak up a little bit more?
I'm curious to know about housing and economic impact of the growing population.
Well, I don't know if I can answer that off the top of my head. I can say that the number of housing units in the city grew at the same percentage as the population. I can also relay a data point that I just happened to notice today, which was, which sort of stood out to me, that Ward 2, while actually increasing in population, also decreased in density. So there are fewer people per unit in Ward 2, which I think also speaks to perhaps there being more units and the types of units and who's moving into them. So I just think that there are a few data points there. But this is all brand new. I mean, we just got it a couple of weeks ago. One of the things that we do know is that a lot of the federal funding formulas are really looking at these numbers. So I think a lot of those federal funding numbers mean that the city will be due for some increased infrastructure and CDBG and other types of investments. So this is really a positive, a big positive. And I would be remiss if I also didn't recognize Dimple Rana and the incredible work she did running the Revere Counts 2020 process, where this isn't all. I do not believe this is all just actual growth. I think this is also a lot better counting of the populations that are in the city, and she deserves a ton of credit, and her whole team for all the work they did under sort of tremendous challenges of between the federal administration at the time and and their reaction to the census, and to, of course, COVID and the difficulties that made on being able to do this. So, there's a lot of credit that goes to her. So, but yeah, sorry, I know that doesn't answer your questions, and I think that's a longer-term data study that we'll definitely want to do.
Thank you.
Chief Callahan?
I just want to thank him for all the hard work. And Ruben, I had one question. Did it talk about the affordability and how the income has gone up for residents? Has the income kind of gone up or gone down? Because I know the housing prices, the rental prices have really skyrocketed here in Revere, and they just keep going up. Do we have any data on that?
So I don't think the census is going to have housing data in that way. I think the housing data it should have income data, but I think we're going to have to rely on some of our other partners like MAPC and others to help us continue to monitor some of those the prices and the costs. We know that it continues to go up in some neighborhoods, and that's why there's so much work being done in the Hrc administration to think about new ways to deal with affordable housing, including the new Affordable Housing Trust Fund that just got passed and that we're in the process of building. So, but yeah, I mean, these are good questions that I don't have the answers to here, and they're not going to be in the census. And the deeper census data is going to come out, I think, in about another month or so, where they'll get beyond the demographics and density and into much more deeper issues.
Thank you. I have nothing to add. Would anyone like to propose any new business, other business?
Do you mind if I ask questions? So I have a couple of questions because I know a little bit about reprecincting.
We're still on re-precincting. I'm sorry.
Oh,
Go ahead.
My apologies.
Sorry, I didn't call.
It's okay.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. I knew a little bit about it because Revere Youth in Action came and gave us a presentation on what it is. Oh, my bad. Just like a couple of questions. One, you mentioned that according to the census data, whatever, that Ward 2's population increased tremendously since the last time we did the census. And that means that when it comes to creating, correct me if I'm wrong on this, when it comes to creating when it comes to creating precinct lines, that it should be cut smaller and not bigger. Why is that? Wouldn't it make sense to make it bigger since the population increases?
I'll share, this is just a little bit of data, so let me start with that. You can see the dark blue, for those who can see it, that is the 2010 population, and the light blue is the 2020 population. So you can see that there's growth across the city, first of all. So in trying to balance this out, right, and I off the top of my head, I can't, the numbers are going to be probably about 10,000 people per ward, right? So thinking about each ward, in order to get to the same average of 10,000 people per ward, you're going to need to reduce the number of people in Ward 2 by about 1,000 people. So in order to reduce Ward 2 by 1,000 people, you're going to actually have to cut off Ward 2 a little, cut some portions off and move them to other wards. Does that answer your question?
Yes, yes, thank you very much. My second question is, you mentioned that the point is to try to stay away from either refraction or what's the other word? Like when you
Packing.
Who makes the decision on who's writing the lines or not?
Oh, that's a good question. I didn't get to that part. So after the forum, after the public forums, we're gonna draw some draft maps just to spark conversation. So we'll probably have at least 4 different maps that people will be able to have a conversation on, and we have to figure out if it needs to be entirely online and how we would do that versus in person or some sort of hybrid version of that. After that, we will take the feedback from that forum and go and redraw some additional maps and provide those. Maybe we'll have ideally we would have a second forum if we don't have the time, and because the current deadline as it stands right now is we need to have the final maps approved by the end of October, which is a very short deadline. But if the legislature does what we think it might do, then that changes to the end of December possibly. But if we go the way we're going, then we would have new maps that then the city council would ultimately approve. And then after the city council approves those maps, then there's a state commission that has to also put their stamp of approval on those maps as well. So that's kind of the process. After we do this initial forum, ideally we'll have an opportunity to have some additional public conversation before we present final or proposed maps to the city council. Does that
Yeah,
help?
no, that answers my question. I guess my third and final question is kind of a bit tedious, so just bear with me. But in terms of who is on this group of people who are creating these lines, because obviously there are always going to be some bias, especially considering some of the political figures in our city. How do you guys stay away from all that? How do you guys watch out for that bias being integrated into the decisions that you guys make?
I mean, that's a hard question to answer. I guess I will start by saying that, the mayor has expressed a set of values around ensuring that, we are trying to be a more inclusive city, and that the power of the election process and the voting process and is a key part of ensuring that we are a more inclusive city. And so I think that the administration is coming to this with the right set of values. to what you're speaking to. And I think on that's sort of on the one side, and on the other side, I think that we're all aware that, that there are a lot of eyes on Revere right now. And so I think that's another piece that we're paying really close attention to, and making sure that we're putting something out there that enhances Revere's reputation instead of creates controversy that none of us want to see.
Thank you very much for everything, Ruben.
Thank you, Vice Chair Shea. Those were great questions. And I'm sorry I overlooked you. This is what happens when I go out of order. I think I'm being sort of cute, and then it backfires.
No, you're good, Madam Chair.
Okay. Now, anyone has an opportunity, if there's any new business or other business that they'd like to propose, please unmute yourself.
Madam,
Okay, sounds like first,
You want to go first? Okay. I just want to know the status on the Director of Equity and Inclusion, where we are in the process.
so I know that there's been quite a bit of resumes submitted, and they were getting ready to start scheduling interviews. Unfortunately, the Human Rights Director is quite sick right now. What did I say? I'm sorry, the Human Resources Director is quite sick right now, so until he gets on his feet, we've had like a little bit of a pause. But we did get, from my understanding, a lot of applicants. There were so many that they need to vet the resumes because some may not have met the qualifications. So it is moving along. We just had a little bit of a blip because the Human Resources Director is sort of ill and has been out of work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Carol?
I think I still took my question.
Kill your thunders.
Yes, I was hoping that I would have had more definitive information, and when I checked in earlier this week, I wasn't able to give you more information. But I will keep you posted if anything of significant comes up before the next meeting. Anything else? So we have a public forum. I do see someone here. I'm not sure if this person wanted to speak. No. No, I'm seeing a nod of no, and I don't see anyone on the Zoom. So I guess that I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor? Raise your hand.
Aye.
And so let the record show everyone in person and on Zoom raises their hand. The meeting is adjourned, and our next meeting is Thursday, October 7th at 5 o'clock. Thank you all.